This is Automated Thought.
You know, there's a lot of people in this world that I don't really understand. One type of person I don't understand is the swing voter. You know, those people who brag that they don't vote Democrat or Republican, they just vote for whoever they think the best man for the job is. They say that because it makes them sound free-thinking and independent, but I think it's kind of stupid. I mean, I'm a liberal. I'm going to vote for anyone who's going to help advance the liberal agenda, whether they're perfect or not. Most people aren't. Whoever's going to vote in favor of universal health care, a strong social safety net, and a responsible foreign policy, they've got my vote. I completely understand the mindset of a traditional Republican voter who voted for Donald Trump, even if they didn't really like him or think he was the best candidate. Hell, some of them thought that he was a lunatic piece of shit. But if a Supreme Court justice is on the table, as well as the getting rid of the Democratic veto over a Republican Congress, then that makes sense. Go ahead and vote for Donald Trump. The people I don't get are the swing voters who voted for Donald Trump. What the hell were they thinking? There was once this old guy at this job where I worked, and he kind of sounded like this.
Yeah, man, no. I remember voting for Ronald Reagan. I mean, who didn't, right? But then when he asked me to vote for George Bush, I was like, hell no. George Bush is out of touch, man. I don't like him. I voted for Dukakis. But then 4 years later, I'm like, you know what? Bush wasn't that bad. You know, he won the Persian Gulf War for us. And I don't really trust this new guy from Arkansas, Bill Clinton, whatever his name was. So I went ahead and voted for Bush that time. Then 4 years later, when the Republicans put up Bob Dole, I said, no, man, he's too dang old. I'm voting for Slick Willie. He's a good guy. But then in 2000, when it was Al Gore's turn, I took a look at Gore and said, no, man, Al Gore's a big old nerd. I can't vote for that. I'm voting for Bush Jr. He's more of a real man, and he'll do more to protect America and stuff. But then in 2004, I was like, man, Bush fucked up. He ain't nearly as good as his daddy was. So I went ahead and voted for John Kerry, because John Kerry went to Vietnam, and I respect that. Then in 2008, when it was Obama versus John McCain, I was like, man, I don't know about Obama. I'm going to vote for John McCain. He went to Vietnam even more than Kerry did. John McCain all the way. But then 4 years later, it was like Mitt Romney. Hell no, I ain't voting for Fancy Pants. I'm gonna vote for fucking Barack Obama, god damn it. And then last year when the Democrats put up Hillary, I was like, no, man, let's vote for Donald Trump. You know, he's got some ideas. Let's give him a try. You know what's wrong with this country is that we can't seem to make up our minds. Politicians always going this way and that. Seems like nothing ever really gets done. What's up with that, man? I don't know. I just vote for the best man for the job.
Seriously, people, make up your damn minds. Another type of person I don't really understand are libertarians. But not just every libertarian. I'm talking about the survivalist types who always go around saying stuff like,
no, man, you think you're free? Ain't none of us really free. You try stop paying your property taxes, you'll find out real quick how free you really ain't. We all just renting our freedom from the government.
Now, let's shelve all the metaphysical arguments about whether human beings can ever be free agents or whether the universe is deterministic. I'm talking about just this gut level of freedom that these people seem to desire. I had a friend in college who was like this. He said that he yearned to be an Indian living hundreds of years ago because then he could go off into the forest on his own and do whatever he wanted. Yeah, sure, maybe. It's nice to have some time alone, I guess. But after a while, you would start to feel like Leonardo DiCaprio in that movie The Revenant. Cold, hungry, alone, and desperate to get back to your people. Most libertarians don't want to be Indians, I guess, or Native Americans, but they do seem to imagine that at some point in the past, there was this golden age of freedom where men and their families lived off the land completely independently. I'm no historian, but I'm pretty sure that was almost never the case. From the very beginning of human history, over in the Fertile Crescent, there was always some sort of warlord or authority or tribal chief who was going to tell you what the fuck to do. There were always such things as taxes. Did you see last week's episode of Game of Thrones, where Jaime Lannister and Bronn were scouring the countryside of Highgarden and taking all the grain? Yeah, that happened. Nowadays, the government just takes a reasonable amount of your money. Back in the day, they would just come by and take all your shit. The King of England might declare that every homestead has to give him 5 gold coins, and if you only had 3 gold coins, then you were fucked. Before that, some psycho might put a brand on your daughter's arm and say, hey, by the way, your daughter, the Lord gets to fuck her first, so don't marry her off to anybody. That's how things worked. There's always been authority. When I was a kid, I had this storybook of Robin Hood, And the very first thing that happens in the old Robin Hood story is that Robin kills a deer, and then a bunch of sheriffs or somebody comes along and says, "Hey, Robin, don't you know it's illegal to kill a deer in the king's forest?" And then he becomes an outlaw, and the story begins. Even as a kid, I thought, wow, that's kind of strict. I really don't understand this all-consuming passion for freedom, because I've felt pretty free my whole life living in America. Maybe I'm not the most exciting person, but I can barely think of any time in my life when I felt constrained by society. There have been a few times where I've been pulled over for speeding and a cop says, "Hey, you can't go 53 in a 35. And there was one time when I was young, I was walking across the street drinking a 40, and a cop stopped and said, "Hey, asshole, you can't drink in public." And I honestly didn't know that. I was like, wow, I didn't know that, officer. Okay, I'm going to go back into my house and finish drinking this 40. And he was like, all right, cool. Yes, my freedom was impinged upon, but I didn't have a big existential crisis over it. What the heck is wrong with these people? Basically, every day I can get up in the morning and go do whatever the heck I want. I normally just go to work, but if I want to, I could quit my job, go anywhere, and do anything I wanted to, so long as I had the money for it. I mean, that's the real issue, right? Money? You're pretty much free to do whatever you want, so long as you have enough money to pay for it. I wish these libertarians would just kind of sit and think and realize that the past wasn't all that great. Sure, maybe at some point in your history, if you were a homesteader out in the Louisiana territories or something, yeah, maybe you did have a greater degree of freedom than you do now. You could walk around naked, shit wherever you want, and just go crazy. But then again, you weren't really free from the ravages of isolation, loneliness, want, or despair. The people who've lived that free lifestyle, they basically spend their entire life scrabbling for food. Once in history class, I read about the homesteaders who would walk 20 miles to the train tracks just so they could wave at the trains passing by, because they were so desperate to see faces of anyone other than their 4 family members. Freedom comes with lots of loneliness if you live that way, and it's probably not good. Like I said, I feel extremely free living in America today, and really, any tiny limits on my freedom are vastly outweighed by the benefits that I have of living in society. I have access to an entire internet full of information. I can get on a plane and fly to basically any country in the world and work any kind of job that I want. What in the world do these people want that they don't already have? I always assumed that, I don't know, maybe they want to be like that guy Craster in Game of Thrones. You know, he was free. He had his own lodge out there in the middle of nowhere, so he could murder his sons and marry his daughters. Is that what these people want? Maybe. I sure am talking about Game of Thrones a lot, aren't I? This new season is actually really good, and I'm enjoying it a lot. Game of Thrones is awesome. Anyway, if you're one of these libertarian types, especially these young libertarians on the internet, ask yourself, what freedom do you have, and what are you going to do with it? You really do have a wide range of options right now, more than at any time in history. But if you think that what freedom you have is not sufficient, hey, you can vanish up into the wilds of Saskatchewan. Go out there in the middle of the forest. There's tons of space there. You can hunt and sustain yourself, drink from the river, and live in a dugout or something. Nobody's stopping you. Or hey, if you want to be really free, just go over to Somalia. There's like no government there. Just be careful, because this guy likes to guard his freedom really carefully. You know, I once worked with a guy from Somalia. He came over here sometime back in the 80s or early 90s when the government over there collapsed. If you were to ask him, he would say that the lack of central authority was a bad thing because his country descended into anarchy. He was free to do whatever he wanted, and he chose to get the hell out and bring his family to America. I really liked talking to that guy because he kept saying about how great America was. I'm not exactly the most patriotic person in the world, but when I would hear this man tell me that when he came to America, he couldn't believe that the police here were not corrupt, that if a cop pulled you over, they wouldn't try to squeeze $50 out of you. That's a very rare thing in the world, that we actually have the rule of law. Whenever he would say things like that, I would get the warm fuzzies for America, all up in my heart region. You know why? Because America is the fucking land of the free, bitches. The third type of person I don't understand? People who still like punk rock. Punk rock is over. It sucked. You know what band I like? I like Yes. Yes is awesome. Punk rock sucks.